Good evening. Welcome to Progressive Soup. My name is David Stevenson. I'm tonight's host. And we're back from Philadelphia, from the convention, and had an interesting time, talked to a lot of great people, took part in some interesting events, and it was a great little vacation. Enjoyed it very much, but here we are. We're back. We're making our pivot to the general election now. And now that we have a Republican candidate, Donald Trump, we have a Democratic candidate, Hillary Clinton, we're looking at a couple of other candidates. And we're going to be spending some time between now and November talking about two alternate parties. Why would we care about alternate parties? Well, in the past, you generally see when the polls come out after the primaries, you'll see two candidates who, you can correct me on this, and you can look it up, I want you to. But I believe that you generally see two campaigns whose percentages add up to somewhere between 90 and 95%. A little smattering of people here and there that have alternate candidates. Well, the first polls that came out after the primaries and after the conventions showed that the two major candidates, Donald Trump for the Republicans and Hillary Clinton for the Democrats, had a combined 79% of the vote, which leaves 21% that are not in favor of those two candidates. And personal opinion, I think there are a lot of voters of those 79% that probably do not particularly like their candidates that they're going to presumably end up voting for anyway. But they don't like him, so they're kind of looking for alternate voices, and this is what we're going to be talking about to a great degree between now and November. Okay, we're talking today about the Libertarian Party. I'm sure you've heard about the Libertarian Party, know a little bit about it, and we have with us Michael Tuohey.
Hello, sir.
Who's a member of the Libertarian Party.
I'm actually a member of the Republican Party.
And the reason why I remember the Republican Party is?
Because we are, in Connecticut, we have a closed primary system, so if you're not a member of the Democratic or the Republican Party, you can't vote until the general election. So there are a lot of Libertarians or Green Party or third-party candidates or people that will vote for Democrat or Republican candidates just to get their name out there, basically.
And likewise,
I was going to say, I don't think I've ever voted Republican or Democrat in any national election. But.
Well, likewise, the same thing with the Working Families Party members in Connecticut. It's a fairly strong third party, but I think virtually all of them are registered as members of the Democratic Party, so they can vote in a primary because.
Well, they also promote with the Democratic Party a lot, don't they?
To a degree, yeah. To a degree, they'll generally support the Democratic Party candidate, because the Democratic Party candidate is more than likely going to be closer to their opinions on working family issues than the Republican Party. At least that's how they see it, and I would be inclined to agree with that. Now, when you get to the general election, you've got the Working Families Party on the ballot as an alternative, but generally, as Mike alluded to, they've endorsed a Democratic Party candidate. And in fact, when Governor Malloy was first elected to office, he was elected to the office by dint of the votes he got under the Working Families Party, under his name on the Working Families Party line. That's what pushed him ahead of Tom Foley and got him elected governor. So here we are. We've got the Libertarian Party.
The Working Libertarian Party.
The Working Libertarian. Well, I think this is kind of what we're thinking about in terms of the future of politics, because I think if you ask most people, and I think about 40% of Americans could call themselves independent or unaffiliated.
Well, I was about to say, I read a poll, I forget offhand where it was, but there was about 40 to 50% that wanted a third-party candidate. Not that they would vote for that third-party candidate, but they wanted that third option. And there's been anywhere from 30 to 40% for the last X number of elections. Yeah. But for certain reasons that we'll probably get into in a little bit, we can't get there because you have to get up to 15%. It used to be somewhere like 5%. Yep. Then somebody got to there. Oh, no. Well, we meant 10. And then you get to 10. Oh, no, we actually meant 15.
Yeah.
Then you get to 50. Oh, no, we actually meant 30 or 40.
Yeah.
So.
Well, you know, even if they brought it back to 5% again, once you're in, it's going to cost you so many millions or billions of dollars to even run a campaign. So it's sort of, it seems like the two parties that are dominating right now are in position to put in whatever stipulations or conditions that will come to mind that will marginalize and keep the third-party candidates and the third-party platforms pretty much out of the purview of the American electorate.
Well, of all elections, this would have been the one where we would have said in advance of the primaries that, yeah, there's no way that that a third party or someone that doesn't have huge contributions to their campaign would have any chance of going anywhere. And then along came a guy named Bernie Sanders, who, on relatively speaking, a shoestring budget by 2016 standards, got 45% of the pledged delegates for the Democratic Party.
I think he was at, 1,894, I think the last number was?
Yeah, we ended up with about 45% of the pledged delegates, which is...
That's pretty good.
Okay.
You should know better.
I should.
Before we go on the air.
Should.
Okay, we all do it.
Yeah.
So we would have thought that going into this election, but as it turned out, we had a candidate that did very well on a shoestring budget in terms of getting pledged delegates. Now, on the other side, Donald Trump got a lot of delegates, but I think a lot of his delegates were by dint of states being winner take all if you got 50%. So a state where he got 51%, he ended up with 100% of the delegates.
Well, you know, with Bernie Sanders, I think that a very significant factor that we really have to constantly keep in mind is that he did educate a large number of the American people, and at this particular time in history, the rise of a third party is definitely very viable. The problem is the establishment is well aware of that. They've got two candidates that are not very popular, and the rise of a third party, especially a charismatic leader of that third party, can throw everything askew. If he can get 45 delegates,
45% of the delegates.
45% of the delegates. Right now, Jill Stein, well, it was shortly after the convention, she picked up in donations 1,000%. That's pretty significant, and she's looking pretty good, and she does. But she's not going to get the exposure. You know, she might be able to compensate for the lack of funds with the exposure, but they're not going to give it to her. Nor will they give it to Gary Johnson.
Oh, yeah. But they didn't give it to Bernie Sanders, and look where Bernie Sanders ended up, in a pretty good place. So there's a lot of evidence. Now, you don't have to go very far back.
They have learned their lesson from Bernie Sanders.
It could very well be, but we don't have to go very far back in American history to a fellow by the name of Ross Perot, Ross Perot, who turned in a pretty good showing as a third-party candidate.
Well, he also had a lot of money to back him up, as he was talking about earlier.
Yeah. But then again, a large amount of money, which you would think is a prerequisite nowadays. When you get small donations from a lot of people, it's not as much. It's not a big a deal anymore.
Well, Ron Paul got a lot of small donations. Yeah. And got little to no press. And what gets me is right about a month or two after he had kind of not faltered out, but he had kind of dropped out, Barack Obama started getting a lot of smaller donations. And then everybody jumped on, well, look at all these small donations that Barack Obama's getting, completely negating all the small donations that Ron Paul had gotten 6-7 months beforehand.
That's true. This is back in 2008. Yeah.
Well, you know, with the exception of the small donation issue, the exception being Bernie Sanders, there's this PAC money hanging over everybody's head. And that's what they're going to be. That's what they're going to be drawing from, and that's what's going to win an election, because the ante will constantly rise, depending on who's backing who. And right now, Hillary's got most of the money. She's got it from the pharmaceutical companies. She's got it from the oil companies. She's got it from Wall Street.
She's got a lot of it from big donor Republicans that have shifted her way.
And the media right now, they're benefiting from it. So but that whole rise of Donald Trump is significant as far as I'm concerned, because what happens is you put this candidate up there who doesn't necessarily reflect the establishment.
He doesn't really reflect anybody, honestly.
He doesn't, but somehow or other he manages to show his talent in the reality TV area, and that's what the viewers are familiar with. They are charged up by him, just like remember the Duck Dynasty? Those guys with the the beards. Remember?
No. Mike is actually a member of ZZ Top.
Oh,
there you go. Well, I got to grow it a few more feet before that.
Okay.
Well, there was one guy that had a short beard, so
yeah, that's true.
I forget what his name was offhand.
The one that nobody remembers because his beard was too short anyway.
His name was Smith, wasn't it? He
Something
started
like
a cough drop company. If we keep this up, Mike's going to come down.
Brothers,
he's going to come down on us. So we should really get back to where.
So go ahead. You're talking about the.
I was talking about the fact that Trump was able to somehow or other create this media frenzy, and the media had to hang on to it because it meant money to them.
Yeah.
So, but see what it is? It's short-term thinking. They're pulling in all this money for him, so much so that all of a sudden he gets all the exposure that he needs. He's the man for a segment of the population that is going to take on the Republican Party, so to speak. And now there's another huge money interest that's highly disappointed. You take the Koch brothers and some of these other guys. Hey, what's going to happen now? I mean, how did this happen?
They see him as being losing. They're not going to get the return on their investment.
And so that they don't want that to happen with a third-party candidate. Some charismatic third-party candidate all of a sudden captures the attention of the American people, and the ball could possibly be pulled out of the hands of some of the establishment. So they are going to do what they can to keep the American people totally unaware of Gary Johnson, Jill Stein, or any other third-party candidate who is definitely superior in intelligence, talent, and ability than the two birds that we have right now.
Well, we will be getting on to talking about third-party candidates, and specifically the Green Party candidate Jill Stein and the Libertarian Party candidate Gary Johnson. But we're going to continue. We'll let the discussion go.
Michael, you can tell us more about.
We're going to be doing this pretty frequently.
Let's talk about that.
Well,
that's what we want to talk about. The
Libertarian Party.
Just one thing. If we're going to talk about Trump, though, it's interesting to note that he got anywhere from 30 to 40% of horrible turnouts and voter registrations and voter turnout.
Yeah.
So he basically got 30% of another fraction of a percent of the Republican base. So now he's going to try to turn that into 51% of the general election. So I don't see that happening.
Only because everyone is so also disenchanted with Hillary. So that's
I still remember. I think I texted you one day, and I was watching an interview where there were a lot of annoyed Bernie Sanders supporters, and there were some that were saying, "Well, I'm voting for Trump now because Hillary's the candidate," and I'm just sitting there going, how do you go from Bernie Sanders to Donald Trump?
Yeah, that's an impossible stretch.
I mean, you can hate Hillary Clinton all you want, but I don't go how you go from A to Z there. But
there's got to be a small minority that are thinking in that fashion. I think very tiny. I think most of them are sophisticated enough to know that they have a problem. They're caught betwixt and between. They have an option of compromising their values and going with Hillary or not.
Well, you had all those Bernie Sanders delegates that just walked out of the Democratic convention, and then you had Jill Stein, who was out there, somebody giving her a megaphone, and she had, I think it was about an 8 or 9 minute speech that I showed on one of my shows. It's going to be this coming, I don't know when this is airing, but this
is airing Wednesday.
Okay, then this coming Friday.
Yeah.
Is it possible?
Or no, the week after, sorry.
I know we don't have this kind of politics in the United States, but hypothetically speaking, just for the sake of our conversation, is it conceivable there could be some kind of a coalition party between the Libertarians and the Green Party? How far apart are they?
I think it's more the environmental side on the Green Party, and then there's a couple different kinds of libertarians. And as we were just talking about beforehand, there's some libertarians that basically say all government is evil, we should have absolutely no government, and they're the kind of anarchist libertarians out there. Then there's another side that's kind of basically either a Republican or a Democrat with some kind of libertarian tendencies where they agree, say, 90 to 95% with a given party. They just believe maybe in ending the drug war or ending, overseas spending or something, but they agree generally with a given party. And then there's kind of a collection, the other 90% of the Libertarian Party, which is kind of in the middle. So everybody looks at one of the other two extremes, and then they think that all libertarians believe in either no government or complete government, one or the other.
I've had the benefit of having some libertarians, including local guy Billy Michael, it's a good friend of mine, that I don't necessarily agree with on anything, but we still have a friendship, on the show talking about the Libertarian Party. And we've generally come to the conclusion that what separates liberals from libertarians is that libertarians believe in reduced government spending, only taking care of the national defense, and a very limited objective, very limited goal, and a very limited job in terms of American politics.
It's basically getting out as much of the personal life of the individual and as many foreign entanglements as possible.
Yeah, that's exactly true.
They're pretty isolationists.
I think isolationist is maybe a harsh word to use, but you could say it. But I think it's more not wanting to get involved in foreign intervention
and nation building.
All right, okay, they'd have that in common right now with the Green Party. Okay, so
and with the progressives.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah,
but it's this whole idea of a laissez-faire attitude toward government that is kind of contrary to a progressive movement. Progressives prefer to somehow or other initiate social programs, so that they can benefit the people. I don't know. I don't think.
And there I would say that the consensus I've come to with guests of mine that were libertarians were that libertarians are for extremely limited spending, and progressives are believe the government can do great things. That you need to be cautious and thrifty with how you spend your dollars, but at the same time, feeling that the government can accomplish many things. We collectively, as a group, we citizens through our government can accomplish a lot of good things that you couldn't accomplish otherwise. That we can leverage our money. And Medicare was a great example of that. Back when Medicare had the ability to negotiate with pharmaceuticals for drug pricing. And by dint of the fact that the Veterans Administration and Social Security, Medicare, were purchasing a lot of pharmaceuticals for the people they represented, that they were able to negotiate prices very strongly that we as individuals wouldn't be able to. We wouldn't have the leverage.
Well, they still can do that. I mean, if we had
Yes, but there are limitations on that now. There have been limitations put in place in recent years by Congress as far as how much they can negotiate. That was
Oh, that's kind of interesting. I can see pharmaceutical companies want to put that kind of a stipulation in, but then again, if the pharmaceutical companies have their own candidates within the political system, it's understandable. See, once again, rigged, bought. So frustrating.
Yeah, that's a lot of it. But I think there is certainly hope, and that's why we're here talking about, as you mentioned, as you alluded to, the idea of parties finding common ground with each other, with more than multiple parties, multiple small parties finding common ground, agreeing to disagree on certain issues, but finding common ground. And I think that you and I have talked at length about two of the things that are common ground amongst ourselves and amongst libertarians is opposition, and Green Party also, is opposition to the Trans-Pacific Partnership and opposition to fracking.
These are valid oppositions.
And the Republican Party, the Democratic Party, both have in their platform that they're in favor
right. If you want
the Trans-Pacific Partnership and fracking.
If you want to do something about either one or both of those issues, you have to get to the root of the problem, and the root of the problem is the money. Now, Koch brothers have been connected to the Libertarian Party. They have money. If they can usurp the Libertarian Party in the same fashion that they were able to usurp the Republican Party,
they've made some small inroads with some subgroups of the Libertarian Party.
They have
subgroups. They're not that. There are many different Libertarian parties.
They're looked at more as Republicans than they are Libertarians.
Only because the Republicans have glommed onto the notion of limited government as a means of trying to bring in Libertarian Party members on election day.
Did Ted Cruz come out of that?
Out of the Libertarians?
Yeah.
No. He's always, as far as I know, he's always been a Republican.
He claims, and there you go, the Tea Party. The Tea Party is sort of a subset of the Libertarians, but it's not.
It started that way.
It's sort of, kind of, but the Tea Party is kind of become a beast unto itself.
It started more as people that were angry at both parties, and then essentially got co-opted by the Republican Party, because there used to be, you would go. As I put my glass down, that you would go to a Tea Party event, and I never went to one, but you would see, I hate the Democrats right next to I hate the Republicans. Then it slowly morphed into, okay, well, I hate the Democrats. Here's Sarah Palin.
Yeah.
And then if you disagreed with Sarah Palin, you were roundly then booed, or if you disagreed with, insert Republican candidate here, you were roundly booed, which slowly, like I said, morphed into more of a Republican party platform than it did the Libertarians.
Yeah.
It's amazing when the Republicans usurped these groups. It did have an effect. I mean, on the whole Trump candidacy has been. There's an effect. There's a cause and effect relationship there. Dissatisfaction with the establishment, Tea Party.
Well, we all have an axe to grind against the government, so to speak. I mean, who's going to come out and say, I like paying taxes? It's not popular to say that. It's not popular to even point out any circumstances under which taxes are used for the benefit of the citizens of the United States.
Well, it depends on what you're paying for. Let's put it
there
that
you
way.
go.
If we're paying for more military spending, where we're at, I think $780 billion, then no, I'm against that. If we're paying, a state to help its individuals, I'm for that. But I'm not for paying for more federal spending.
Right. Yeah.
So states, I have no problem paying taxes that way, but I'm against paying more federal taxes and giving more to the federal coffers when the states are closer tied to their individual citizens.
Yep.
So there's a parallel now with the Green Party and with the Libertarians. Both of them would prefer to spend less on the military.
Yeah.
I've often said just hack the military spending in half, and then you can give $2 billion to education for every state. You can give $2 billion for infrastructure to every state. You can give another $2 billion for homeless, job training and things like that, and for drug education and things like that. And then I would argue you don't change the amount you spend for, say, 16 or 20 years. And then after that, after we've paid everything off, we have a good infrastructure, as your cameraman's yelling and throwing things at people. But because I think I read somewhere that by 2050 we're going to be $2.35 trillion to fix our infrastructure totally.
Yep.
So if we pay it off now and start building up our infrastructure, our educational system, like I said, by state, you can then start weaning down how much you give to the federal government and then start giving more to the state government. and then we'll have more money in our pockets, and we'll have less money in the federal government's pockets because we won't need as much federal spending. We'll just need more state-by-state spending.
You know, in terms of policies and priorities and issues that Mike has just spelled out, it's also part of the Green Party agenda: education, infrastructure. So, 2 minutes. That's a long time, isn't it? 2 minutes? That's what, 120 seconds? We can.
We in a football game or what?
Can we talk? We can talk for another 120 seconds or so.
And the one thing is infrastructure.
Go, Mike. You got it.
I was going to say the infrastructure isn't just roads and bridges. It's also the electrical infrastructure. It's cell phone towers. It's a lot of things, communications that we've either built or had built that are crumbling because we have. Our I forget the number I was looking at, but we have somewhere in the neighborhood of decades-old electrical infrastructure right now that is just ready to crumble at any given point. And the same thing with a lot of bridges.
I would agree with you on the electrical infrastructure with the understanding that with the solar energy, which has become much more prevalent in America, it's certainly worldwide, certainly in countries like Germany, which runs principally off solar energy, that these alternative energies are going to, in the long run, make it unnecessary for that infrastructure to even be built, even be rebuilt. It's kind of it's sort of like the oil industry. It's a dying culture, so to speak.
But I will say, though, in the interim between getting to solar energy, we need something to stave off, complete blackouts.
Yeah, well, that could be a very short interim. But at any rate, we're going to come back and do another show for tomorrow and continue the process. We're talking about third-party candidates, and we're going to go from there. Thanks for joining us. Progressive Soup, David Stevenson, Michael Tuohey, and Joe Niola. Thanks for joining us.